Hi there, this is the Hartston Tal line, played between Bill Hartston and former world champion Tal. It's in the Sicilian Tal Gambit from the Keres Memorial Tournament held in Tallin, Estonia, 1979. After e4 and the Sicilian with c5, white can try f4, the Grand Prix attack, but this can allow black to strike with d5 in the center. So some players who like to play the Grand Prix, rather than playing f4 on move 2, like to play knight c3 first, which takes away the d5 option from black. If however f4 is played on move 2 and black plays d5, white's going to take on d5, and rather than capture with the queen, queen takes on d5, which will allow knight c3. Black will invariably play knight f6 first, trying to recapture with the knight. Well, white can give back the pawn by simply playing knight c3 or knight f3, or can try and hang on to the pawn with c4. That will allow black to play the Gambit line with e6. So white usually prefers to play bishop b5 check. Bishop b5 check on move 4, that's been played by Ivanchuk, Short, Kartov, Chayev and Sveshnikov. Black's going to interpose with bishop to d7, and after bishop takes d7, queen takes on d7. Now white supports the pawn on d5 with the move c4. Black continues with the Gambit line e6, and rather than trade on e6, queen e2 pins the pawn on e6, activates the queen. Black counters with bishop to d6, hitting the pawn on f4. That's going to be defended by d3, but first white trades on e6. D takes e6, f takes e6, where the f file is going to be utilized by the rook coming to f8 after castles. d3 supports f4 and now castles. After knight f3 and knight g4, releasing the rook and now the bishop attacking the pawn on f4, white can play knight c3, because the recapture of the pawn and attaining material equality comes at a price in a complicated variation. For example, if bishop takes on f4 now, bishop takes f4, rook takes f4, that rook on f4 might be a little bit out of place, offside if you like, after h3, and the knight back to h6. White's going to be doing okay with castles here, perhaps long castles, and if the knight goes back to not h6 but to f6, then queen e3 hits the rook, as well as c5, where white is actually doing better here. That rook is misplaced on f4. So black is in no hurry to recapture the pawn after knight c3. Black plays knight c6, that's better, and after white castles short, now bishop takes f4, allows white the option not to recapture, but maybe queen to e4. Black can throw in a tactic here. Of course, white is threatening now, bishop takes f4. Black can throw in a tactic. Well, black can also simply defend with e5, that's got to be okay, but if queen to d4, giving up the queen to knight takes on d4. If knight takes on d4, then black wins immediately with the simple tactic bishop takes h2 check, because after king h1, then rook takes on f1 is mate. So going back after queen to d4, if white plays queen takes on d4, the trading of queens, then we're likely to see c takes on d4, bishop takes on f4, d takes on c3. The bishop is still being hit, as is the pawn on b2. So bishop d6 hits the rook. The rook goes to d8, hitting the bishop. c5 defends. After c takes on b2, hitting the rook, rook a b1. b6 softens up the pawn on c5, making the rook takes on d6 an option. So if rook takes on b2 and b takes on c5, bishop takes on c5, and now rook takes on d3. We see now that black is a pawn up, but this position would be adjudged at more or less equality. The game, in fact, went on to end in a draw. So that's an interesting line in the Sicilian Tal Gambit. This is the Hartston Tal line. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.